Hey folks, happy Tuesday. Thanks for coming to another Airmeet event. My name is Mark Kilens. I'm the head of marketing over at Airmeet. Hope you're doing great today. Happy May 2nd. I just, really never realized that, May 1st is a pretty big holiday around the world. In America, basically don't celebrate it or recognize it. So, for the folks of you that had the day off yesterday, hope you had a good day off, good long weekend. Looks like we got a few people in the webinar so far, which is fantastic. It's going to be a jam-packed session all about the intersection of content and events. At the end of the day, like how do you use both things to book more sales meetings, get to pipeline faster? We're going to try to leave you with at least 5 actionable things you can do right after this webinar. Let us know what you're feeling, what you want to learn about though today. Throw it in the chat. I'm going to bring my special guest up right now, George, who's the CEO of Minuttia. I think I'm pronouncing that right. He says it better than I can, so I'm going to have him do a quick intro, introduce himself, and share a little bit more about him and the company, and we'll get right into the content. George, what's going on?
So you got the name right. So I guess this is going to be a nice session. Hello, Mark, and welcome to everyone who joined us today. May 1st is indeed a big bank holiday for many countries, and it was for us as well, for Minuttia. But May 2nd is the day, which we had this session scheduled. And so I'm very excited to be here with all of you and discuss, things around the power of content combined with events to drive growth, right? So yeah, excited to be here and be joined by Mark for this session.
Yeah, no, I am too. This is pumped. I'm pumped up because we talk a lot about people first go to market at Airmeet, and I think the two motions of content led and event led are super important to lean into these days, and you can do both better when you combine them. So we're going to talk about how to combine them, how to get more signals of buying and customer intent from them, and ultimately how to get more of the actions, the conversions we all want, right? More sales meetings, more pipeline. Zacharias, hope you're doing well. So folks listening, like, which one are you doing more of right now? Content led, using content to generate that inbound pipeline, etc., or is it more events, using events and webinars, either online or in-person events, to generate pipeline and meetings? Like, which one are you folks using more right now? Or do you think it's like both? They're kind of using them equally. We're more on the event side. I take it, George, you're more on the content side, right? When it comes to your company, right?
So we do a lot of content, but surprisingly enough, we do a lot of events as well, or at least, I want to think that we are doing a lot of events. We can always do more, but we do events. We started with webinars. We, of course, have a podcast that we run for over a year now, and we started doing webinars this year, and also we started doing in-person events this year, right? So yeah, doing a lot of things there, and also go as guests to like events and webinars with other companies. So we are pretty active when it comes to events, and I think that, like, as I see it, one complements the other, right? And it works great because once you are at a webinar and someone attends the webinar and they are interested in the things that you shared, they can then visit the blog and read, like an original piece of content that you've done, and get more interested in what you do and what you have to say and so on and so forth. So as I see it, like these two things go together hand in hand, and they should go hand in hand. I don't know what's your experience, but this is our experience so far.
Yeah, no, it definitely is the case. They definitely got to go hand in hand. Like we'll talk about this right now in terms of the customer journey and how it's been just changed so much in the last 10 years. But yeah, I think it's like bacon and scallops or steak and lobster or, peanut butter and jelly or like whatever your favorite two foods are, combining them together, you get something even more delicious. That's content and events. Sarah says she's doing both. That's fantastic. So let's dive in. Let's talk about some things. We're going to make this as interactive as possible. If you have any questions, and if you're feeling like super, hey, I want to come on stage and ask a question live, just raise your hand. You can use that feature inside of Airmeet to raise your hand. If not, use the chat, use the Q&A. We got some great resources for you as Well, I want to start with this though, George. I'm going to pull up this stat because, you and I both talk a lot about like making your content and events highly relevant and applicable to where the customer is in the journey. And the fact of the matter is, when you think about the customer journey these days, it's taking even more effort to turn someone into a buyer. So this is from McKinsey on the left and Forrester on the right. So McKinsey says between 2016 and 2021, an average B2B buyer is using double the amount of channels. They used 5 channels to kind of interact with the company in 2016. Now it's 10 in 2021. Crazy, right? More channels, but more channel saturation. And then look at the Forrester stat. This has gone from 16 to 21 to 27 in just a matter of 3 years. 27 interactions it requires to make to happen before someone becomes a customer. So when you think about this from like your point of view, so I'm going to pull something else up now. I think the way that you kind of like show it is really interesting, where it's like, how do you design a customer journey that is more, you could say, conducive to how people kind of like want to buy these days? And I kind of break it down into like live experiences, which is what we're doing right now. This is a live experience. You're here live listening to us. Well, if you're listening to the recording, it's on demand. But the second one is that on-demand piece. And I really think to satisfy those channels now and those 27 required touch points or more, you have to kind of think and map out your customer journeys when it comes to events and content. And you could either start with content and do events from it, or start with an event and create content from it. Like, what's your take on this though?
So can we go to the previous slide, because I think it's connected to that, and it will help us illustrate the point a bit better. So we would all like to have a journey that looks somewhat like this. So we have one, and this is the last touch point, right? And the journey goes like this. A visitor searches for something like frame.io alternatives on Google. They click on the first search result by markup, and they sign up for a paid account with markup. That would be the ideal customer journey. Okay, one touch point. They search for something on Google, they visit the website, they sign up, they give us their credit card details, and they become a customer. But the truth is that this is not the case today, okay? This would be an ideal customer journey, but the reality is a bit different, because as you shared with us, Mark, there is an increasing, we see that, first of all, the journey is not linear, okay, as most people think. And I think that this notion of the journey being linear goes way back to when we as marketers started using like concepts like the funnel, which may be good as a way to kind of help us put things in perspective, but it also disconnects us from the reality, which is that the journey is not linear. It's not like people move from this stage to that stage to whatever stage comes next, right? So you have to capture the attention of people in whatever journey stage of the journey they may be at, right? And so this was an ideal customer journey. And once again, we would all like the customer journey to be like that, but the reality is a bit different. And this, the next slide that we have in this slide deck, where it comes into handy, because we saw that we had one touch point.
So I'm going to this slide instead, actually, just because even though both of our slides are kind of showing it on a linear scale, they're not. Like, it's not just about one buyer either, right? This example shows that you have a demand gen manager attending an event. You have the CMO, who's the leader of the marketing team, doing something else. You have the demand gen manager going to the blog. You got the VP of marketing doing something else. Then you have a demand gen manager again, downloading an ebook, and then an opportunity is created. And that doesn't even take into account the sales interactions and all the other interactions that probably took place. So one of my most, I think, important piece of advice right now, the first actionable thing that you folks can do right now, is to create a unified calendar when it comes to your content and events. Like, this is the most important thing. And at Airmeet, George, we use Asana. So if your two teams are not on the same, in the same group, like meaning your content and events team, get talking and working together, right? It might be demand gen, it might be a separate events team. Content might live somewhere else in brand, or it might be in demand gen. But like, the most important thing is to figure out what is the topics that content's writing about and creating about, and themes and what is events doing, and marry them together, right? And we actually have an integrated campaign planning meeting every week where events and content come together and do monthly and quarterly planning and bring it all together from an execution standpoint into Asana. So this is, I think, my first key takeaway for everyone. Marry the two things up together. I know Kabir's excited about that. He's in the chat. He's part of our events team. But yeah, if anyone else is like listening, like let us know if you have any questions about this idea, because it's been a huge thing that we've done at Airmeet. We did the same thing at Drift as well when I was there for almost 4 years. We brought those two things together, George.
Can I ask something though?
Yeah.
How can you, I can understand content, right? And I can understand how you can kind of map different stages or even intents or, however you want to call it, to specific content types and formats. But I guess my question is, how do you do that from an event standpoint, right? How can you like create events that are tailored to specific like segments of your audience or people who are in a specific stage of the customer like life cycle journey?
Yeah, we'll talk about that right now when it comes to like event-led growth. Like so there's content-led growth and there's event-led growth, right? And then you have like product-led growth, and a few others. But I think content and events have to be married up, because at the end of the day, you want consistent messaging in the market for a lengthy amount of time. Consistency is paramount when it comes to marketing and sales, and that drumbeat of that message. And for us at Airmeet, we have 3 campaigns every quarter that we execute. So each campaign has a theme, and each campaign with their themes. So we have a people first campaign, an event led growth campaign, an event intent campaign right now. There's different topics that we're talking about, both in our content and in our events. And here's an example. Here's an example that we did at Drift. Let me pull this up, and it's going to help answer your question even more. One thing you think about is like, of course, the who. That starts with good content and good events. Who are you targeting? Is it specific? Is it more broad? So you have to ask the who. In this example, the who was pretty broad. We did this event, a new funnel for a new decade. The fun fact about this, George, is we did this event like 3-4 weeks before the pandemic started. So we were doing large online events at Drift way before the pandemic started. Not way before, but a little bit before. And what we did is we planned the event out using an event-led first motion to say, we're going to build 2 other content assets from this event. We're going to build a big ebook that you see on the right-hand side of this slide. And we're actually also going to build an on-demand course from the 8 or 9 sessions that were taking place in this event. And who is this targeting? Demand gen folks, people that are building the marketing funnel, executing the marketing funnel, right? People that are trying to generate more meetings in pipeline. So it's a broad-based, more top of funnel type of signal. What's cool though is with the event that we did, we got a lot of different intent signals based off of people engaging before, during, and after the event. With the piece of content, we got slightly different intent signals. And the other cool thing is now you have a live asset and an on-demand asset that can be used as an evergreen type of asset over time. And you can start to like break those things up into even smaller assets as well. So, to answer your question, I would say this was a big kind of online event, not webinar, a bigger online event. It was about 3 hours with 8 or 9 different partners that was purposely planned out to then build this piece of content. And I would call that more at the discover stage of event-led growth. There's discover, engage, and grow. We'll talk more about this over the next 45 minutes. This is more about helping your prospects and prospects and potential buyers discover more about their problems, about you, the brand, about what you believe in, why they should pay attention, why should they care, adding a lot of value and education to them in that kind of initial phase, and discovering or helping you discover more about them. Like, what motivation level do they have? Like, where are they in the buying journey? And things like that. What do you think? Like, do you folks do something similar?
So first of all, I think that what you're referring to, or kind of a theme that I kind of recognize there, is the fact that you can use events as a vehicle to also create other assets, and potentially, some of these assets, along with the event on demand itself, will target different audiences. But one thing that is also important here, and I think that we need to kind of highlight, is the fact that events can be a great vehicle for you to repurpose content, right? And create other assets, like in different formats, like ebook, as you mentioned, or a blog post, or whatever this may be, right?
Yeah, I mean, I got another visual for you all. Here's another takeaway, right? This is part of the third takeaway. You can noodle on and do something with, today, everyone. We call it the Great Eight. I mean, George, you teed me up perfect for this visual. The event is the center of gravity. It could be a webinar, 30 minutes, 60 minutes, could be 3 hours, could be an in-person event. But look at all of these 8 other assets you could. I mean, it's a lot, right? I mean, and every content team is strapped for time. And the other reason why I think events are so powerful, George, is because of AI. Here's my take on this. This is going to maybe a little off topic, but I don't think it is. You know the source of what's being said from someone at an event. I mean, granted, like where did they get it from? Okay, there's that. But when it's an event, in person or online, like you see the person talking. You see me talking right now. You see George talking right now. That text transcript that can come from that is validated to some degree versus, if you're just creating content using, a lot of AI with some human editing, or, the humans are coming up with the kind of topic and theme, and then the AI spitting out, and then there's some editing. I still have concerns right now where the state of AI, content tools are. Like, where is the source? How reliable is this? How many other people have talked about it? Like, does it have your unique voice and tone? Jasper just released something today that was about brand voice and tone, using AI to like really master your brand voice and tone, which I think is a great application of AI. But I think from an event standpoint, it's a really powerful source of original content to some degree.
Yeah, I think that what's important here is the word original, right? And at Minuttia, we took a stance regarding AI content. I think that right now there's a lot of hype around it, and we will just have to wait and see where the dust will settle down and how things will be then regarding AI content. But for now, we took a stance and we said that we don't use it for content creation, but I will focus on the word original, because I think that what we need more nowadays is original content, right? And as you correctly put it, like, events can be a great way for like creating original content that you can later repurpose into these Great Eight or other content types and formats, right? But I do find it as like one of the paths forward, because it's not just the fact that you can the content created by AI, or the way content created generally today is fundamentally wrong, in the sense that we try to copy what other search results are doing, and so on and so forth. But it also, like, you can feel it. It almost feels like something plastic, right? It doesn't have soul in it. And so I think that original content in the form of surveys, data studies, first-person narratives, third-person narratives, invented concepts, and so on and so forth. We have some of those in the slide deck I prepared, but also original content based on events like this webinar here, for example, is definitely a way to stand out from the crowd and share unique perspectives. And even if things are not perfect, like, it's something that came out of like a human being, right? And this makes a very big difference.
100% going to talk about this, because I think when you go to an event, it's a gold mine of content that you can plan before the event, even if you're not hosting it, right? Either in audio format, video format, or both. And then, of course, it can be turned into text. And a lot of that content that you create at a trade show or industry event where you might be sponsoring, or just even as an attendee, can be turned into these formats. I love this slide. Ironically, I'm going to show a slide kind of right after this, George, that shows how to think about the types of events you're doing across this Discover, Engage, Grow, event-led growth framework as it relates to some of these content formats. But if you look at like the right-hand side, like you were just saying, OG content, right? Like original gangster content. One of my favorite content formats is surveys and data studies. Love that. We did many of those at Drift. We've done a few at Airmeet. We're going to do more at Airmeet very soon. I think that's going to be super important as we move into this, era of AI. I would bet the farm that that's going to be more important type of content. Personal narratives all day, every day, like storytelling, right? Like, so AI can help with storytelling. Here's my take, George. Can AI help with story crafting? A little bit, right? But AI does not know the life you lived until it downloads your whole brain, which might come at some point. But there's that story piece. So no, I love the things you put on this slide. It's a great slide, folks, if you're looking for inspiration, what types of content to dive into.
So basically here what we do is that we break down, we have three content types when it comes to what goes to your blog, right? Product focused, some people refer to it as product marketing nowadays. Content that's created for a search audience, even though I don't subscribe to the term, you will often hear that, if you hear people refer to that as SEO content. And then we have original content, right? And when it comes to product focused, let's take them from the beginning, take it from the beginning. We have product updates, your help center, customer stories, case studies, how-to guides, and product ROI reports. And by the way, you will get a copy of this deck. We have examples for each of these content formats included in this slide. And then we have SEO content. We start with errors, which is not like something that, let's say, it's case specific, right? For example, if you are a WordPress plugin, you may have to create some blog posts that capture the attention and the demand for errors that, error-based queries that people search when it comes to WordPress, right? Then we have informational, for example, how to put a live stream on your website. Then we have commercial, and commercial, we break this down into two categories at Minuttia. We have tier A and tier B. Tier A is anything that indicates like commercial investigation, like live streaming platforms, for example. And then commercial tier B is anything that indicates commercial investigation, but it's a bit, ahead in terms of the journey, like something alternatives or something via something, right? Then we have job to be done, which is I have a very specific job that I need to do, and I need you to help me with that. Business proposal templates. I need to craft a business proposal, and I need a template. And then we have linkable assets, which is basically anything that has the potential to be linked by journalists, bloggers, and so on and so forth, right? Such as VOP statistics, okay? And then we have original content, which is where things get interesting, and which is where most brands struggle nowadays, right? You mentioned surveys, and I know that surveys, when a brand, like when a company hears the word survey, they immediately are kind of intimidated by it because they think that, we need to run a survey with, 10,000 people, and how are we going to even do that? Well, you don't have to, right? As long as your sample is like relevant to the target audience, you don't have to interview or survey 10,000 people, right? I would focus on the quality of the people you are going to reach out to. And we have data studies, which, as you mentioned, are very good at establishing you as the kind of thought leader in your space, right? This is one of the main objectives there. And I think that we have great examples by brands like Gong, for example. They execute on an unreal level when it comes to data studies, but at the same time, you can see that they are very heavily invested in it. And I'm not saying that once you read a study or a survey or any other type of like format of original content, you may be intrigued to kind of buy the product immediately. But I would say that it contributes to, and it's one more touch point that will lead to the ultimate goal of getting someone to buy from you, right? This is what it is. And I think that, and I think that original content is massively under-leveraged nowadays, especially from...
it's the only way forward, in my opinion. Like, I think original content is like, it's kind of like, distribution costs have gone to zero, content creation costs are now going to zero. I don't know. There's a lot of change that's going to have to happen. So I think one way to also look at this, like, I like your 3 columns. I like how you broke that down. Another way to think about this, folks, and Bryce, I'll get to your question next, and we'll definitely, Josh, talk more about your question. Yeah, it's in the Q&A section of Airmeet, but we'll talk more about that soon. I want to show this though, because this is, I think, another way, George, to break it down. When you think about the intersection of events and content and how it fuels meetings. So don't think of this as purely mutually exclusive. We're like, this content or these events have to happen in these 3 stages. But this is how we see like event-led growth using these different types of events for these different audiences based off of who you're trying to get to this event and how the content could fall from that, right? Like look at this. Like, this is kind of like a thought leadership webinar. Are we going to create some content from this after? Yes, absolutely, George, right? Like, we'll probably clip this up for YouTube and social and might do a blog about it. Simple, right? Live group demo, same type of thing, right? Like, that could be even on demand, right? So that might not be an event that's live. It could be, right? I would make it a little bit more unique if it is a live event, but like, same thing, right? Like, you could have a great live demo that's 20 minutes, but then clip it up, right? VIP prospect experiences. Hey, that's more like ABM style stuff. Why don't you create an ABM style piece of content asset? Probably don't even gate it, but use that as a follow-up or as a way to get people to the VIP prospect event. And guess what? A survey where you share original research with VIP prospects that are interested in that topic, that have a pain around that survey topic, George, and then sharing those results live during that event with some nice food that you maybe, able to provide them through Uber, right? Like a gift card, or if it's in person, presenting it in person, great as well. Like, that's an awesome intersection, right? Of that original content and then catering to a very specific audience of like, C-level or VP level people, right? So I think this is the idea of like starting with like the themes and the topics you're writing about every quarter, every month, putting the calendars together using something like integrated campaign planning, and then mapping it out almost like this. Again, it's not perfectly linear, but this is kind of the journey people go through. And I'll just say one last thing to you, Bryce, about like, and feel free to ask follow-up questions. When you go to an event that you're attending in the industry or somewhere else, and George, let me know what your thoughts are. I always try to study who's attending. So if you can't get the list from the vendor who's hosting the event, try to go on LinkedIn or Twitter or the community that people are talking about the event around, and see who you can find that's going and or speaking. Reach out to X amount of people beforehand and try to block off time in their calendars the day or the week of that event to create content. And it can be simple. Ask them 3 things. I want to interview for 3 questions. And that's related to this topic and this theme that you're going to continue to talk more about in the future. And now you're going to have a collection of video clips, audio clips, and just text-based content that you get from that time you spend at the event. It just requires a little planning, a little network building and relationship building before the event. And you got gold, I think, right there.
I would like to say 2 things here. First, I would like to share a quick story regarding what Bryce asked. So last year we attended SaaStock, which is an in-person event in Dublin. It's a very big event, for SaaS companies. And I was opening one of the stages as a speaker, and we were going to present a case study for one of our clients, right? Because, we are an agency and we also have to kind of sell, right? But regardless, we went there, and after the talk, we gave just a handshake, and it was just a 5-minute talk with I think, director of content marketing, or maybe marketing, at a very big SaaS company, right? This is a company that most of the people in this webinar know. Most likely they use the tool and so on and so forth. Fast forward 6 months, and we were connected on LinkedIn. They were like seeing our content and so on and so forth. It was the time for them to find a new agency, right, for their content marketing efforts. And one of the agencies they reached out to was, Minuttia, right? And we started working with them last month. The point is that events, like the biggest deals, are closed in events, and especially in-person events are big in that sense. And I would say that you should definitely attend. And like, as you mentioned, like it's good to have a schedule and meet some people and so on and so forth. Also, definitely attend the after parties and anything like that, because this is where the best deals are closed. But yeah, this was just a 5 minutes, a relationship that started with just a 5-minute chit chat and a handshake. That was all, right? But on the basis of content, we went there to talk. They saw the speech, right, and they liked it. And then, of course, that kind of initiated this whole relationship, right?
I love it. No, that's a great example. That's a great example of like networking at scale. And by the way, here's a fun fact: you could message George or I right now in Airmeet. Go to the top right hand side, click on messages, or just go to the people tab and send me a DM. Like if you want to meet up after this, if you want to chat later, just send me a direct message right inside of Airmeet, right? Because like that's the equivalent of what you're just saying at an in-person event. You might not be able to go up to someone, but send them a message. Talk to them one-to-one, right? So there's a lot of ways that you can use online and in-person events to achieve what you just talked about. And in fact, I want to just pull this up onto stage really quickly. Let me show the question from Josh. Any best practices for repurposing the content after the event? So you do event first, and now you want to create content. Is there a way to gather and incorporate feedback from an event to make repurposed content better? Yeah, so here's a really interesting way to create better content after an event. So watch this. I'm going to launch this. Watch this, George. I'm going to publish this poll. All right, everyone, please vote right now. This is a mini survey question during an event that's going to help us create content after the event as well. So if you could vote, we got one vote. We have, I don't know, a couple dozen people in this event. Let's get to 15 votes at minimum. 15 votes. I need your help, folks. Let's bring your attention back over here. We're at 3 votes. Come on, we can be better than that, everyone. 3 votes? It's not fun. 4, 5. Here we go. So what's the metrics do you measure the success of your events? Leads, attendees, pipeline, other? It's probably a combination of a few of these things. I think it's like what metric is most important for you to measure the success of the events. I think the question also could be slightly more specific, so I apologize about that. Right, better question, right? Better survey design, right, George? Let's see. I like these answers though. Pipeline's winning. I'm going to hide it from the stage. The poll's still open. But if you go back to that question, let me show it on stage again. Like, that is one great way. Ask a couple questions during the online event or even the in-person event through the mobile app that you use, right? If you don't have a mobile app for your in-person events, if it's a bigger event, I definitely recommend setting one up. Like, you can ask the audience direct questions. You can use the Q&A and chat, right? Like, Josh, like your question is great. Like, we actually have some resources in Airmeet, like on the right-hand side. There's a blog article that answers your question as well. 8 ways to fuel your content engine with events. But to answer directly live in the event, let's pull this up, George. Let me share my screen and pull this up. Watch this. This is how I think about it. Going back to that grade 8 slide, this is now taking the event and typical goals of an event and breaking it down based off the goals of each piece of content. So, George, if you think anything's missing from this, or if you think some of the metrics or goals might be off, please chime in. But I've built many, many pillar pages from an SEO standpoint using content from an event that we planned that said, hey, we're going to build an awesome set of pillar pages based off of this 2-hour online event, because so much of that content is going to be planned out to answer the question of search intent that we're going to try to rank number 1 for. So I don't know. There's so many ways you can do it.
I would say 2 things. The first is like in some events, especially when we had a lot of attendees, we kind of noticed a few patterns when it comes to the things that people were interested in, right? They were like focused on that same topic, and it came up again and again and again. And we were like, after the webinar, we were like, oh man, like we need to do something about that, right? And that something could be, I don't know, a podcast episode, or discussing this same topic, or a blog post, or anything like that, right? So this is one way to think about that. But I would like to approach it a bit differently and say how you can come up with an idea for an event, for a webinar, for example. And an example I will use from us actually is that a while back, I think it was in like a few months ago, like in 2022, we published a social media post. We did a giveaway for a template that allowed people to do forecasting and so on and so forth. And all they had to do was to comment on the post to like our team to send it to them, and so on and so forth. And it got a lot of engagement. And that showed us that, okay, there may be something here, right? Maybe people are interested in forecasting and, connected to that, budgeting and so on and so forth, right? So the first webinar we did for the year, for 2023, was on how to budget and forecast for content marketing, right? And like let's say the idea wouldn't have been born if it wasn't for that post that kind of informed us that people are actually looking for that thing, right? They need more content about that topic. So yeah, I know what your thoughts are regarding that.
Yeah, no, I like it. I mean, I like it a lot. I mean, it's like put the attendee at the center of the event experience. You know, put the customer at the center of your content, right? Put the reader, the viewer, the listener at the center of your content. I think creating in public today is more important than ever. So what do I mean by creating in public? This is a version of creating in public, albeit a smaller audience. I do a lot of stuff on LinkedIn, George, and it's just like, for me, it's creating. Creating in public is like almost getting real-time reactions and feedback to ideas, right? And then, of course, a reaction or feedback to an idea is a signal of interest, signal of intent at some level, right? You know, depending on what type of intent you're talking about. But yeah, I mean, I think that's a super smart strategy. And yes, it definitely will be accessible as a replay right after. In fact, the fun thing with Airmeet is you can get the replay instantly as soon as we're done. There's no waiting for it. You can just click on the watch replay as soon as it's done. But going back to your point, like I do think, like, you know, when it comes to like original content and whatnot, like you have to listen to your customers, and then you have to try to understand how to take what's in your mind for a better version of the future. I know that's a loaded term, but like, how could the future be better based off of things that are happening around us and to us that we can't exactly control? And how can you use those things that are happening around us to help someone be better at getting to some type of outcome? So, very specific example. I'm going to pull up this slide now that shows like how we, you know, came up with this idea of event-led growth, you know, about 12 months ago, just over a year ago. And we said, hey, look, let's do a summit about event-led growth. There's going to be a ton of content that comes from that summit. This is almost a year ago. And what we did, George, is we built a big pillar page, an original thought leadership pillar page, of course, trying to rank for the term event-led growth, even though many people weren't looking for it yet. And say, like, look, this is a huge, really important asset that is a little bit for the search engine, but it's really more for the questions people are going to have about, like, what is event-led growth? Why would I care about that? How does it work? Et cetera, et cetera. So again, this is a good example of event first, content second. But then on the other side of it, you could have content first, event second. Let me actually go to that example right now. Let me pull this up because I think this is going to be a really interesting example for folks. Where is it? Okay, this is a cool example. This company's pretty new. It's a new analyst firm. Take a look at this example. So gtmpartners.com, they built this super big cornerstone content asset, as I would call it. The comprehensive guide to go to market, 8-pillar GTM operating systems, etc. Huge asset. They shipped that, I don't know, back in like August of last year, I think. What did they do next, George? They've done 9 or 10 roadshow events in person and now some online, unpacking that guide. I actually have a physical version of that guide, which I think is right behind me on the ground. And they did is they turned it into a half-day workshop style event where they went deeper into the content. And guess what? As they talked to all those people at the event, they realized, wait a minute, there's a lot more other content we can create. For example, one of the latest pieces of content they created was around this new ROI framework to think about how to show ROI for your product or service to your audience, to your customers. And that was born because of a lot of people asking questions, like you were saying, at these events. So I think it's just the intersection of like knowing that the journey is not linear. It's got to be both content and events these days. And you have to think through topics and themes, but you also have to think through the intentionality of like the audience you're trying to drive to these things and the data you can collect from them as well.
Can I go back to the question about and the poll about, you know, what metrics we should measure and track? Because that's something that I would like to hear your thoughts on. And the question is, let's say a company starts with events today, right? Should they measure like the success of this effort against the same metrics as a company that does events for, I don't know, 3 years now? What I mean is that does the maturity of this like the level where a company is currently at when it comes to events play a role when it comes to the metrics they should use to evaluate their performance against?
Yeah, I mean, I think the simple answer is yes. Let me pull that slide back up. It's this one right here, I think. So the way I think about metrics is in two ways: leading metrics, or the inputs, leading or input-based metrics, and then the lagging or output-based metrics. So what's a leading metric for an event? Registration, attendance. What's a lagging metric of that? Satisfaction of the event, maybe meetings booked, pipeline created, pipeline influenced, right? Same with content, right? There's leading metrics to lagging metrics, right? Like traffic to a pillar page versus the conversion of the pillar page and then the subsequent conversion of that to maybe revenue, a super kind of lagging metric, right? Is it direct sourced or is it influenced, right? So I do think it's a little bit about the metrics. It's more about taking an approach that doesn't overwhelm you or your audience. Like, would I recommend trying to create all of these 8 types of content assets from one event out of the gate? No, definitely not. That's crazy. I'd say you want to think about what are your primary goals right now. Like, if you have a goal of like, I just need to build audience up, then I think you got to do things that are going to maximize the audience reach, right? But if your goal is like, look, I have a decent audience or I have a really well-defined audience, and it's now about just being much more about getting their attention and turning that attention into enough interest where they're going to talk to our sales team or sign up for a free product, then it's different kind of topic, different type of an event approach, different type of metrics to some degree, right? So for me, it always starts with the who and the why. Who are you trying to engage with at the highest level of thinking about it, like attract and engage? And then why are you doing that? And then why would they actually, download it, show up, engage, whatever, right? The why is always two-sided. Why for you, why for them? I think not enough marketers think about the why for them. So when I think about this event, like why are we doing this event? We're hopefully giving you folks some really actionable, tangible takeaways on how to bring these things together. And like, I'll give you an example right now. Like, here's another example of why events are pretty cool. I'm going to show something on the screen right now. You'll see it in the bottom right-hand side. So right there, I just put a CTA. Like, if you're liking this experience, and you might have saw the one that I did for Georgia about 5 minutes ago, but this is a dynamic call to action during this online event. If you want to learn more about how to do exactly this type of stuff, just click the call to action and someone will get back to you within like 10 minutes, guaranteed, right? You can get a demo, right? We also offer a group demo, a live group demo, which I actually think this is what that CTA is. It's a live group demo. But the point is, like, you can drive immediate interest during a live experience to the next stage in your journey, which is like, for us and you, it's like, we want customers. Obviously, we need customers to stay in business. So I think that's where like the advantage of doing a live event kind of sometimes outweighs a piece of content. Yeah, there are tools like Path Factory and others. I'm sure you can come up with some, George, that like give you more data, give you more ability to create this dynamic feeling of the experience. But I definitely think you have to lean into that more these days, because just think back to like what we talked about when it comes to AI. It's gonna change and it's gonna become even more kind of vanilla.
Mark, I guess a question here could be, I don't know if people from the audience have this question, they can let us know in the chat. Okay, but events, we want to do it, we haven't done so far, or we tried it a bit and like we want to learn more about it. Is there a right cadence? Like, how many events? Yes, but how many events should we do? Like, how often, and so on and so forth?
It's a classic marketing answer, or classic answer in anything in life almost. Like, it depends. I'll give you my kind of like suggestion how to get started. Like, look at this event. You reached out to me and said, hey, like, let's talk about content. I'm sure we can come up with an interesting angle for this. I think we kind of have. Let us know what you folks think. Like, did we come up with a good angle here? Are we teaching you folks a lot of things? If we haven't, we apologize. We got to fix that. But like, just reach out to some people that are going after an ICP, ideal customer profile. Reach out to some people that are in your network that you look up to, that you think your audience will learn from it. And like, hey, want to do a 30-minute online conversation or a debate? Or hey, like I saw you posted about this thing the other day. That would be a great topic for our audience. Like, can I interview you style, right? But make the interview a little bit more interesting, right? You could do like, 5 questions in 30 minutes about, these things, right? Like, there's so many ways, like with good copywriting and positioning these days, to make the actual event somewhat unique and somewhat interesting. The key for a good event, though, is fast moving, changing things up, doing things like we've been doing right now, right? Changing up the slides, going to, the view of me and George versus me maybe on the screen, and having resources in the event, right? But starting small and simple with a partner is always where I'd say you can begin. I advise a good amount of startups, and that's what I recommend they do. Like, hey, like who else is in your space that isn't competition, and you want to just talk to? The space being companies or thought leaders, other creators, other people in that space, and get them to come on live. And if you give them a couple assets because they did that thing with you that they can use for their own self fulfilling needs, a few clips or whatever, that's great. They're gonna love that. So to get started, don't overthink it. Make it specific, make it fast moving, and just keep it simple.
You mentioned resources, okay, and I have something that I would like to bring up here. So one of the things that we noticed through the events that we've done, both with partners and our own events, is the fact that people love templates, right? Even if it's just a simple Google Sheet that is very simple and basic, right? No, not even formulas in it, right? But people really like that, and they kind of crave for templates, right? They want to get the templates after the event, and this obviously kind of boosts the engagement as well, and the overall feeling and the taste that the event left you with, right? My question would be, first of all, do you have a similar experience? And also, do you have any other tips for people when it comes to a specific like format or something that you can give away to people just so you can increase the engagement and the satisfaction from the event?
Yeah, I mean, I templates, resources, you can see in the right hand side of Airmeet, right? In that right hand side nav, there's a resource link at the bottom. We can see everyone who's clicking on those, downloading those. We could do personalized follow up because of that. I shared a link in the chat because I think this is a great example. So this is something that we did at Drift and our Airmeet. We did like really good chatbots. And then really good examples or events, excuse me, examples. People love templates and examples, George. They love frameworks, they love templates, but they love examples. That's why your deck has like 20 examples, right? We've shared some examples today. What's one of the best ways to learn? Of course, doing it. Like doing it pretty much outweighs every other way to learn. But then like studying what people have done is a great way to learn as well. And then studying how they did it, AKA the template, the framework, spot on. So the more of that you could share during an event, which is, guess what? Content that you created that you're now talking about, where people can interact and ask questions about, and you can learn something about them. And then maybe even for the first time exposing that new idea, like that event-led growth event that I gave as an example was the first time we ever really spoke about event-led growth in a really meaningful, significant way. So that was like an unveiling event. You don't think about how much time and effort you put into your content. Treat your content like a product. Put an event behind your content. Why not? If you spent 2 months working on this amazing asset, why wouldn't you want to do a kind of a promotion around that and get more data, get more people to become aware of it? I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I've never thought of events as a vehicle to promote content, right? Like you have a piece of content that's important to you. Why don't you do an event or a webinar or whatever that may be to also promote it and give it an extra boost? That's great. I don't know if people have any more questions. One more question I have, I guess, before we start wrapping things up would be, so events, after the event, we have data, right? We have event data. My question is, how can a company use event data to, leverage event data to turn this data into like pipeline or whatever it may be important for them? What are your thoughts on that? And what data should people be more focused on after, post the event?
Yeah, events, especially online, like digital events, give you a lot. There's almost like too much to go through. What you want to try to figure out is just basically like, what's your goal for this event? Is it about trying to get someone to a meeting, or is it really just trying to get someone to become aware of something and see how interested they are in something? So it's staging the journey, right? Like this event, like we're trying to see who's maybe a little bit interested in learning more about content or events, and our companies could follow up with you depending on how you're showing what I call implicit versus explicit intent, right? Implicit, you're kind of just like clicking around, doing stuff, like you got your digital footprints around stuff. Explicit is like, no, you're clicking on the CTA that I'm showing on the screen right now, and you're signing up, right? Or you're downloading one of those resources. It's much more, you could say, much more active versus passive intent. Another implicit and explicit might be a little confusing. Another way to think about it is active versus passive intent. Actively clicking on something, actively downloading something versus passively showing us that you're watching this in a significant way. It's a good sign of like interest, but you didn't take any action other than watch it for the whole time and didn't navigate away to some degree. Strong signal. Is it as strong as saying like, look, I'm clicking on the CTA right now? I don't know. Like, so I do think there are many ways you can do this. The ultimate question is, what is the goal for the event? And that's why I think events plus content is such a great combo, because it gives you more reach. Both together give you more reach, more data, more ways to create interactions that eventually will hopefully equal a sale for you all, and gives you more efficiency when it comes to the actual creation process. Because none of this is easy, right? Creating content, creating an event is not easy. It takes time. I say, like, for every like online event that you do, you need to spend 5 to 10x the amount of time of the event. So if the event's an hour, you're going to spend 5 to 10 hours preparing for the event. For an in-person event, it's like 30 to 50x, right? Like, so if you do a 4-hour in-person event, you're spending, oh my God, like 100+ hours preparing probably, like no exaggeration, right? Like there's a lot of stuff that goes into that. Unless you get it on like rinse and repeat, if you will. But like there's just a lot to this that I think people can kind of just be better at when it comes to planning. And that's ultimately the answer that you want to ask or the question you want to ask yourself right now. Am I spending enough time planning how I want to get more value out of the stuff that I'm creating? And I was like, oh yeah, of course I'm planning enough. Like I would question that. Like I question to my team all the time. There's some people on my team right now listening, and like they can vouch. Like, what is that famous quote from like the Art of War? Like the war is won before it's fought, or something like that. Like the battle is won before it's fought. It's the same thing with this. Same stuff with marketing, I think, and sales.
Yeah, and one thing that I would like to say here is the fact that, of course, planning is important, and events take a lot of time, and content takes a lot of time, and anything that can have a positive impact to your business and you achieving your goals takes a lot of time and energy and focus. You kind of touched on that earlier, but I think that working with other companies and having partners in that effort can make the whole process easier, right? Because you join forces, and they will give time, you will give time, and the end result may be better because there were two companies like trying to make things work instead of just one company, right? One brand. So we always try to go with partners when it comes to events, and I think that we will continue that way, because it's also better, right? It's also better to do things with another company. I don't know.
100,
Are we ready to wrap things up?
If there's no other questions, I'm happy to leave. I'm happy to drop off, give everyone 5 minutes to go to the bathroom, get a sandwich, take the dog for a walk, whatever you folks want to do. I thought this was a great conversation. It went by very fast. And hopefully you folks learned a few things. Let us know what your biggest takeaway maybe was in the chat. For the folks that are sticking around still, was there a big aha takeaway moment? Let us know in the chat. That'd be great.
And of course, big thank you to everyone who joined us, right? Thank you very much for giving 1 hour of your day and being here with us today. Really appreciate that.
Yeah, we greatly appreciate that. That's time is the most precious asset we all have. So, George, thank you for having me. Thank you for setting this all up and organizing it, and I really enjoyed it.
Thank you to the amazing team at Airmeet for the for the tech, of course. First of all, behind this, and the team is amazing, and you guys put a lot of effort into these things. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, you're welcome. And Sarah, great takeaway. I love it. You're very welcome. Zacharias, thank you. And yeah, everyone else, if you want to connect with us, just find us on LinkedIn. Happy to chat, and have a great rest of your day. So much to digest, Jasmine. Yeah, I hear you, right? There's a lot to think about. Good stuff. All right. Thank you, George.
Thank you.
Cheers.